The swearing in of this cabinet is amongst the fastest following an election, and the beginning of the new parliament will be one of the most rapid following an election in Canadian history. We are starting as we aim to go on. Our government will deliver its mandate for change with urgency and determination. We're going to deliver that mandate with a new team, purpose-built for this hinge moment in Canada's history.
All right, it's back to work. Prime Minister Carney is making that pretty clear, I think.
And behind him, all those people getting to work. But there are an awful lot of faces that I don't recognize yet.
Yeah, 28 ministers and 10 secretaries of state in this new cabinet, and well over half of them are brand new, mixed with some familiar, experienced faces too. And it's those repeat ministers that had Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre saying this.
14 Trudeau ministers are now in Carney's cabinet. It's more of the same when Canada needs real change.
I'm Catherine Cullen, host of CBC's The House.
I'm Daniel Thibeault, host of Radio-Canada's political show Les Coulisses du Pouvoir.
And I'm Jason Markusoff, producer and writer for CBC in Calgary.
And together, we are House Party, a weekly podcast diving into the big burning questions about this new government. And this week we're asking, can this new cabinet deliver on Carney's promises? Okay, guys, before we figure out whether or not the cabinet can actually deliver, let's talk about what's in it. What did we actually get here? Dan, you and I were both hanging outside Rideau Hall as the cabinet was being unveiled.
In a very nice sunny days. It's much better to do that in May than in January.
And that was my little joke, right? It was like sunny day, but not sunny ways. This is not just, thank you for laughing. It's a little corny. But this is not Justin Trudeau's cabinet anymore. No. So what did you make of this new cabinet?
It's a whole bunch. It's an interesting combination, and we'll debate about that. But it's a good mix of experience and new faces. You can't wipe out completely the old cabinet, I think, because then you lose all the knowledge, all the experience, everything that you need to bring up the speed. New ministers that you sit around the table, you need to have some experience. I remember in 2015 when Justin Trudeau made his first cabinet, he was very limited in the amount of experience he could bring around the table, and that was a bit of an issue for a lot of ministers. This time around, he kept people like Dominique Leblanc, Mélanie Joly, Stephen Guilbeault, Anita Anand came back, and then those people can take the new ministers by the hand and bring them where they're supposed to be. At the same time, the new faces kind of make it real when Carney says it's a new government. It shows a new face. It shows a new trajectory. It shows a new agenda. I think at least that's what he's aiming for. As far as I'm concerned, today, it felt like it worked, at least partly.
He had to bring in new people. You can't say you're the change guy and your government is for change from within if you're bringing in all the same guys. So there's probably some people who are thinking, I was supremely talented and I did all these great things. And now I have to figure out my life on the backbenches. It's just, I think, I think for those people who are left out, probably a big deal of the reality of the situation. And for those who, like Mélanie Joly, who may have been really enjoying being the chief diplomat as foreign affairs minister, she's like, well, time for an economic portfolio, something different. Like this is just kind of one of the obligative new faces of governments thing that he has to do.
I mean, I do think it's right. You have to look at this and see it as change. And Mark Carney said today Canadians didn't vote for small change. They voted for major change. Yeah. But I'm kind of going to cheat in my answer to this question by stepping back from cabinet for a minute and saying if the question is like, how big is the change here? Can it deliver the change that Mark Carney is promising? I think the answer comes back to Mark Carney. I mean, he acknowledged it during the news conference today. It's also about how you govern. How much do you delegate to these ministers? This sounds dull, but I think it matters. How do you run a cabinet meeting, right? Mark Carney is not Justin Trudeau in a lot of ways, but the most significant way, I think, is this extreme and detailed clarity of vision in terms of what he wants to do. I do think it matters who's around the cabinet table, but how he is going to do things, I think that is going to determine whether he gets the kind of results he wants. It's not just about, having the right people in the photos behind him.
That struck me, the feeling that I'm going to run this thing like I ran some board meetings back in my past lives. And I think that will really set the tone to what this cabinet can do. The other thing that really struck me as well when he was asked about Joly moving from foreign affairs to an economic portfolio industry here in Canada, and what kind of an impact this could have on the negotiation with the United States, he basically said, and I'm paraphrasing here, but he basically said, there's one person talking to the United States, and it's me. It's going to be the Prime Minister. So basically, that file I'll take care of. This is my thing. We have to take care of economy, growing trade, taking down trade barriers between provinces. And so the challenge now is within the country here. And this is why he sees, and I don't know, Mélanie Joly, who I was talking to earlier this afternoon, was saying it's not a demotion. This is something that I wanted. And this is something where I think I can make a difference. I don't know if she bought the argument that he put forward to her when he came up to her with this assignment, but it's obviously the way he sees it. And it'll be interesting to see how it unfolds in the next few months.
Coming from Alberta, there are two jobs that people from Alberta go right to look at: Environment Minister and Energy Minister, because those are the people who are going to be, yes, Mark Carney will be at the top of the food chain, setting the priorities, but those two people will be dealing with the oil and gas companies, dealing with the environmental groups, trying to set the policies that will have huge impacts on people in those sectors, really on the Alberta economy.
Okay, and so what do you think then in terms of the choices that were made?
This seems like one of those classic cases, and we haven't had this in a while, where there is a environment, energy, good cop, bad cop. On one hand, you have Tim Hodgson, former Goldman Sachs person, worked with Carney at the Bank of Canada, chair of Hydro One, and was on the board of Meg Energy, an oil sands company. I was talking with some colleagues about just imagine how much furor there would be out there in the green world, and people like Stephen Guilbeault's head is exploding if they saw that an oil sands director was appointed by a Conservative government as on the Energy Ministry.
Yeah.
And then there's the one that Danielle Smith focused all of her reaction statement on. She didn't even acknowledge Tim Hodgson, who could be somebody that the oil sector really likes, is Julie DeBruzen. She wasn't very high profile as a Toronto Danforth MP. She was parliamentary secretary for climate change and environment, but she has been outspoken in some cases and has pushed against the Tech Frontier oil sands mine within caucus 5 years ago. That was a big flashpoint. Talk has been a big advocate of single-use plastics, and she seems like somebody that certainly in Alberta people are depicting as kind of an acolyte of Stephen Guilbeault, going to face a lot of scrutiny, much like Catherine McKenna and Guilbeault did, and that could be an interesting clash both with Alberta and perhaps with some of the priorities Tim Hodgson and Carney might want to put forth.
Yeah, well, why don't we talk a little bit about who stayed, and why don't we talk a little bit about new faces? So Dan, there is sort of a core of people who remained from the last Carney cabinet and from the Trudeau cabinet, right? Some of these big names, you were talking about Mélanie Joly before. What does it tell you, this group of folks who have managed to stay in high-profile roles?
Well, I think it comes down to trust, first of all. I think Carney works with the base of the relation is how much do I trust these persons? Dominique Leblanc, obviously. He was at the center of the previous administration, and he made himself indispensable in the center of this one as well. François-Philippe Champagne, first guy that took Carney on a farm. That's got to be worth something. Mélanie Joly, obviously, in Montreal. It's a huge workforce in a campaign. It's a bunch of volunteers. She threw her support behind him right away. I'm not saying all of that comes from supporting him, but it helps that he got to know them during the campaign and probably build that trusted relationship that he needs to say, I want to keep working with you in this particular environment.
Okay, environment. This is a very nice segue, because what did Jason was talking about before? Stephen Guilbeault is still in this government.
Yeah.
He is a lightning rod. Why do you think Mark Carney kept Stephen Thibeault?
He's not in environment.
Yes.
I think Thibeault is a fantastic campaigner in Quebec, knows the province really well, knows a lot of the issue, has put a lot of time, established links with environmental group and lobby groups, and not only like he was talking to oil company as well in his previous capacity and all that. And the fact that he's the Quebec lieutenant, and the fact that the campaign in Quebec went superbly well, and they made some major gain in Quebec, it would be hard to say, well, you're my Quebec lieutenant, and you obviously played a part in that. Now I'm going to kick you out. And I think there's a bit of a reward there. I think Thibeault, as a former heritage minister, will know how to navigate what needs to be navigated to build on one of the pillar, I think, that is going to be this administration. There's a lot of it is economy, obviously, and we've heard that word many times today during the press conference. The other branch would be Canada-U.S. relationship, obviously, tariffs and all that. And then there's a part that's also Canadian unity. And Thibeault is rightly or wrongly seen as the person able to conduct that. I do have to say, I talked to Thibeault about that, and I asked him how much traction does he think he have when he's going to land in Alberta to start talking about Canadian unity with Daniel Smith, for example.
She
who doesn't
actively tried to get him fired.
Yeah, he doesn't have many nice things to say about him, and he seemed to be optimistic he could come up with something. I don't know, Jason.
I mean, I guess I have to imagine that all those attributes and positives that Danielle just laid out makes it worth all the frustration and anger and angst they get from Danielle Smith and from Pierre Poilievre, who focused a lot of his frustrations on this cabinet on Stephen Thibeault as well.
I'd like to just run through maybe 3 names that are new to cabinet that are all interesting to me for different reasons. One is Lena Mettledge-Diab. Now, she is not new to politics. She's a Nova Scotia MP, Halifax West, but she is going to go from not having been in cabinet to the Minister of Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship. That is a huge jump.
Yeah.
This has been one of the thorniest issues for the Liberal government, and putting somebody who does not have ministerial experience in that portfolio is a surprising move to me. So I think we're really going to want to watch and see what she does with that file.
But she has provincial ministerial experience, right?
Fair. I believe that's the case, but still.
But immigration on the federal level, I don't want to sound cynical, but I'll say good luck, because I haven't seen any of the previous ministers do anything perfectly well in that particular file. It's always complicated. It's the system in Ottawa. It's the relationship with the province, the provinces that's hard to nurture. I'm not saying she's not going to achieve anything. I'm just saying it's one hell of a task there.
Yeah. Okay. And so I also want to talk about Gregor Robertson, Minister of Housing. He was Mayor of Vancouver, I believe, between 2008 and 2018. What do people across the country know Vancouver for? Yes, amazing sushi, confusing weather, beautiful landscapes,
yoga,
and housing. And like insanely priced housing. I worked for the CBC for 2 months in Vancouver. It was the first thing I did in my career in like 2005. And I remember doing a story. They were doing a story across the country. What will $1 million buy you for a house? And I was sent with this cameraman to film this like shoebox of a house in 2005. Now, admittedly, Gregor Robertson wasn't mayor then. Mark Carney has pointed to the fact that he has obviously experience running. I believe, in fact, he was the longest serving mayor of Vancouver. So a lot of experience running one of the country's biggest cities. He understands what municipalities need, and thus they will be able to better manage how the federal government can help municipalities. But there are still going to be folks, I think, and I think this includes some in BC, who say, I'm sorry, the track record on housing prices when he was mayor of Vancouver is not great, and having him in that file raises some questions. So a challenge is set for Minister Robertson. And finally, I will say Evan Solomon, former broadcaster, CBC and CTV. It's his title I'm interested in, Minister of Artificial Intelligence and Digital Innovation. I don't think this is just some sending up smoke signals that this is something that this government cares about. Mark Carney cares a lot about artificial intelligence. Yeah. So what is Evan Solomon going to do with that file? I think that's interesting to watch.
Yeah, that'll be an interesting. Something needs to be done with that file. And that's the thing, right? It probably send a signal that there's a willingness to tackle that and do something, because there's a whole lot of people around the world who are saying, slow down here. We're losing control of something that could become one huge problem at some point, and we're not paying enough attention to the way it's being used right now. And I think that's one of the way to show that he cares about that is, you know what, I have a ministry with that name in it.
If I can go to Gregor Robertson for a bit, I think I'm really glad that you raised that one, Catherine. I was talking to somebody in housing, and yes, the fact that Vancouver is not the poster child for affordable housing is an issue. But it's about working with mayors, the housing file, but it's also working on mayors. Because you have to get mayors to reduce red tape, change their zoning policies, gore a lot of sacred cows to bust some heads and get housing built. Like, it's going to cause a lot of friction, potentially, with mayors, with municipalities, with reluctant councillors and civic administrations. So if he's somebody who knows how to work with municipal politics or can persuade or coax people along municipal politics, then we may see some good and interesting things out of Gregor Robertson.
Build, baby, build. Gore, baby, gore. Is that... And it doesn't have the same ring to it.
No, but it's a good point that Jason is raising here, because there's a lot of those taxes and fees and things that city puts on development that the federal government would like to get lifted. Yeah, get rid of. Those are usually a lot of time needed by the municipalities to cover for infrastructure cost, or they need that because it's their only way to finance the road leading to that new neighborhood. And so Mr. Robertson shows up with that knowledge. He knows what those fees are charged for. He probably knows where the cities are maybe a little heavy on the taxing scales there. So he can get a good idea of what it means and find a happy medium somewhere to navigate.
And guess what? They're back, Dan. Secretaries of State. What do you think about those?
It's been a while, eh? Last time was Harper, I believe. Harper had some of those. I think it's a cheap way out for Mr. Carney to say, my cabinet is small. See? It's 28, right? 28 members. I had 23 before the election. So see, I'm reasonable. But I've got 10 Secretary of States. And so I still have some of those people that I can reward, that I can bring along, that I can give files to. They're not part of this whole big thing here. It's 28. So I think it's a bit of a magic trick to try to make people think, I'm keeping that small. Mind you, Mr. Trudeau had some interesting ministries that were full ministers who probably deserved back then the Ministry of State. So,
well, this is the thing about these Secretaries of State. Let's flash back to 2015 when Justin Trudeau first did his Sunny Ways cabinet, and he boasted that it was gender neutral. Except there was a larger balance of women were these junior ministers, and when us fine journalists and some other people out there said, "Hold on a second. These are not all full-fledged ministers." Then he went and made the Minister of Sport and the Minister of Small Business and the Minister of Seniors all these full-fledged ministers with these pay raises and fuller staffs and full access to cabinet. And so I think it does make sense to go back to the more traditional role of having some junior ministers who are maybe a bit of a training role or focused on certain small things like seniors or sport or nature. Combating crime is a funny political messaging one. Maybe we'll see what Ruby Sahota does in that.
And it's a weird one to me, though, because it's such a priority for the Conservatives, and it seems to me that you're suggesting with the Secretary of State thing that it's perhaps like less of a priority, but I know that's not what they want to message. I still don't understand how the things intersect.
There's also a public safety minister
and a justice
as well.
minister. Yeah, so how does all this intersect? That's still an unanswered question for me.
Sometimes it means it's all messaging. And speaking of messaging, I don't think it's lost. I got to say, as the guy from the prairies, that there are as many ministers from the 3 prairie provinces as there are in Brampton, Ontario. I'm just going to keep that in my craw.
Yeah, they went hard on Brampton, didn't they? 3 ministers, I believe, from the area. Ministers and secretaries of state, or just ministers? I'm not even sure. But yeah, it was a big day for Brampton.
Brampton is very well represented in cabinet, yes.
Let's talk about who's not in cabinet quickly, because, Mark Carney made some choices, right? Jonathan Wilkinson, Bill Blair, Cody Blois was in the last cabinet. There are a lot of folks who just did not make the cut, and some of them real Liberal stalwarts, like, again, somebody like Bill Blair. Jonathan Wilkinson, who's known Mark Carney for 25 years, he said in the video where he endorsed Carney. What do you think of them being left out?
I think it's the unfortunate cost of trying to break away from the previous government. You can't bring everyone along, and at some point you have to make hard choices, and that means that some good elements are going to be left behind. Right before the election, the smaller cabinet that he made, we talked about Mark Miller earlier, who was a very efficient minister in the immigration portfolio, got left behind, and was even told, I'm told, you might have a shot at the next cabinet, and he's still not there. And so at some point, because of the link between the past minister and Justin Trudeau, or the Trudeau government, because of what they did, because the file they were on.
I remain surprised. A few ones that surprised me. One, Nathan Smith, people seem to be excited by him as a breath of fresh air in housing, had potential to do things. I'm not sure what he was accomplishing in. He was appointed during that turmoil period in December through March. Karina Gould. I think she was campaigning as this, kind of stalwart of the progressive end of the Liberal Party, somebody who was new, younger, functionally bilingual. I'm surprised that there wasn't room for her. And I really want to light a candle for Ariella Kayabaga, the MP from London, who was appointed right before the election as House Leader, a role that doesn't have any role when the House is not sitting. And now she gets reelected, when the government doesn't do very well in southwestern Ontario. And that role that she had that she couldn't actually do anything with is gone, vanished, poof. She's back to the backbenches. Boy, politics is a trip, eh?
Yeah. I want to go back to Nate Erskine-Smith and Karina Gould. I wonder if it's not a way for Mark Carney to say, I'm moving the party back to the center. Those two particular ministers were associated to the left side of the political spectrum. And by keeping them away, does that send a broader signal that, see, I'm a business guy, I'm bringing back the party where you guys used to see it a few decades ago, and I don't know, maybe it's part of the exercise somewhat.
On the other hand, Guilbeault, and I gotta say, while I'm mentioning in Quebec and after Daniel speaking, where was Carlos Leitao?
Yeah, he's wondering that to himself. I think he was hoping for a call. It never happened. Carney was actually questioned about that during the press conference this morning, and
he's a former Quebec finance minister, which is why this is so surprising. They didn't wind up in cabinet.
Under Philippe Couillard's Liberal government a few years back, and a lot of people in Quebec were kind of taking for granted that he would be brought into cabinet. I think at some point there was just a limited number of seats that you could give to Quebec, and they focused on other areas. And unfortunately, Mr. Leitao is in Montreal, as many other Liberals, and so choice had to be made. Once again, he was the victim of those choices.
Okay, before we go, guys, I think, have to talk about the Pierre Poilievre news conference in reaction to cabinet, because I found it fascinating. Let's just listen to a little bit of it.
He appointed Trudeau's old team and Trudeau's old advisors. Stephen Guilbeault, whose radical green agenda would shut down all future developments in our resource industry, is still the minister responsible for Quebec. Sean Fraser was the immigration minister who caused the immigration crisis, the housing minister who gave us the housing crisis, and now he's the streets. Then there's François-Philippe Champagne, Trudeau's Minister of Everything, who never really managed to do anything. And he did it very loudly. But nice guy. I'll give him credit. He's a nice guy. But he was the Minister of Industry, during which we had the worst economic growth of any country in the G7. And now he's in charge of the budget.
So the thing that blew my mind about this, maybe blew my mind is strong, but really struck me was at the beginning of the news conference, Pierre Poilievre says, it is a truly great accomplishment for these ministers to have made it into cabinet, and I want to congratulate them. And if you've listened to Pierre Poilievre for years, like I have, it sounds like the setup to a joke. Yeah. And then there was no joke. He was just trying to be statesmanlike. What a wonderful thing.
It's literally a 1 in a million opportunity. I think they have 40 ministers in total, and there's about 41 million people, so it's literally 1 in a million to be a minister, and a big accomplishment to get to that place. The Conservatives will take our role of holding the government accountable seriously. That doesn't mean we reflexively oppose everything the government does. When it comes, for example, to foreign affairs, if the government does a good job at defending our national interests in negotiations with the U.S., then we will support those efforts. And when they're right, we'll stand with them.
There really was, I thought, more of a statesmanlike tone, a clear effort in so much of what he said to sound, frankly, nicer and a little bit more collaborative. But he just can't quite stop himself, right? So he's nice, masterclass in failing upwards, right? Like he can't quite repress the tough guy side of him. And I just think it's really interesting because you can see that he is trying to adopt a different tone. And so will he continue to push forward with that? Is it going to work? Does he get better at it? Or is it always going to sound disjointed?
It feels like it's just not natural. It feels like he's trying, like a little bit like it was during the campaign at some point, someone told him you need to smile more. And so he kept smiling and smiling and smiling. And then sometimes it's just like, okay, it's too much, man. Just tone it down. But he was told to smile, so he smiled. And now he was told to tone it down and be a little more, try to work together with the other party. And he's trying to send that message, but then halfway through the sentence, he just pivot and goes back to his old self. I don't know. I have a hard time believing it. I have a hard time buying what he's selling. And stock 6 months down the road when I've seen him more than once or twice, and see if it sticks and if it works. But right now, it feels like it's an attempt to be something that he's naturally not inclined to be.
40-some% of the population or the voting public liked the latter part of his press conference.
Yeah.
So there's still a market for that. There's still, a necessary, role for the opposition leader to be on opposition and criticize and find flaw and fault in them. It's a bit much often to hear him say, wait, these ministers, they're all liberals.
Really.
Breaking news. That
gets a bit much. But also I was really struck that he was talking and acknowledging this time, which he didn't during the campaign, saying, I am grateful that the Liberals are adopting so many of our policies. But the tone with which he said that and some of the stuff at the end, tapered off rather quickly when he got into his, old greatest hits on Champagne and Guilbeault and Joly and Fraser, et cetera, et cetera.
And I think it speaks to this whole question of what the Conservatives need to do now, right? Because the results were a loss is a loss, and losing your seat is no small thing, right? But it's not like they were a massive repudiation of what Pierre Poilievre was offering. But I would say he needs to do better with women, right? He needs to bring a few more people on board. He needs to not fight with provincial Conservatives or not have his team fight with provincial Conservatives. And I think that it seems to me that that's where this is trying to go. Whether he can get comfortable in that space and make it credible, and whether that's even really the right direction as they try to figure out what the magic formula is for them going forward. I'm fascinated by this.
Yeah, that's the thing, because it worked. It worked, and Jason is quite right, for 40+% of the population. It needs to work more if he wants to form the government. And people within his caucus and Conservative strategists will be quick to point out that he also had a 20-points lead going into that campaign, and it just melted away throughout the weeks, months leading to the election, which led to the result we're in front of right now. So there's obviously something that needs to be done. I don't know what it is. I think he doesn't know what it is either, and he's looking for a different tone or a different discourse. He needs to find something somewhere.
What struck me was that this might have been Poilievre thinking, if caucus and the party is going to determine that they want a happy warrior, not a how do you like them apples guy, then let me try to be that. But it could be, who knows, that Party and caucus want a happy warrior to try to take on Carney, and they conclude that Poilievre can't be that guy. I mean, this was kind of the first sort of test of this new role, and I think a lot of people might give him part marks. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I cannot recall the last time I heard Pierre Poilievre say a member of the Liberal Party was a nice guy, even if it was a setup for a shot at François-Philippe Champagne. It was still striking. Okay, so Pierre Poilievre's going to work on his tone. The cabinet is going to work on change. And we're going to work on the next episode of House Party coming up in a week. Guys, listen, this is fun. As always, thank you so much.
Take care.
That is it for House Party this week. Thanks to my co-hosts Jason Markusoff and Daniel Thibeault, and thanks to our production team, Caitlin Crockett and Carla Hilton. Be sure to give us a follow in the podcast feed for The House so you can catch both House Party and my other show, The House, every week. That's 2 shows in one feed. The House will be with you on Saturday, and House Party will be back next Wednesday with another big, burning political question.